Good evening. This is Family Constellations, Family Energetics Core Concepts. It's class number 8, 2018. I'm Michael Reddy, as usual. Mostly I stay that person. Sometimes I swap out with some inner part. I'm going to review just a little bit, and then we're going to go on into how to start applying all this high-level synthesis that I am talking about. These last two classes, it's been a lot of work to put the foundation under these. I mean, to get to the point where I could say various things and have actually, I think people have basically the wherewithal to not only follow them, but hopefully to be, I'm on a crusade about this. I told you, if I was younger, I'd be out there screaming and yelling or writing more books or whatever. I just think it's profoundly important. The magic button stays up for the $200 price for Home Altar stays on your homework page until sometime tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to take advantage of that price, scoot over there and hit that button. Kat, I refunded you $29 because you paid the non-special price. So you
Thank you.
Yeah, Check Reckoning has a $29 refund. Linda, go ahead.
I have a question about the class dates, because I know we are supposed to start on September 23rd, and I know I will be out of the country, and I'm not exactly sure when I'll be back. I'm probably in the middle of October, but just curious about what the dates are. Are they going to be contiguous? Because this is supposedly a 9-week course, but you just said we were on session 8. So I'm thinking it's session 9, actually.
Well, see, we don't count the demo as a session because we don't count the demo as a class.
Okay.
That way it stays in sync with the pre-recorded version and the class number stays the same. And it's confused us too. We're using the wrong numbers all over the place.
Okay.
Most of the time, people in the Home Altar class have made heavy use of the Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is very nuts and boltsy. So, the stuff that's kind of talked about, not in outline form, but just, mentioned in that chapter 4, just we dig into all the different parts of it and try to get you doing your own constellations as fast as possible, and try to help you learn how to present them in such a way that people can help you with them. All of this I find very useful. It's how I keep my records. If I do remote constellations with people, I have pictures of what's happened, as well as a genogram, as well as notes. I don't know if that answers your question, but you should be able to do it, because you don't have to be there. You don't have to be there live. There's plenty of opportunity to interact if you want to.
Okay, and the class is?
It's the same time as this class, Wednesday nights.
Right, but how many sessions?
7.
It's 7 sessions.
And
okay.
Every once in a while, if people are working hard, I stick in a bonus session. So it could be 8.
Okay. But it's contiguous from, it looks like Wednesday is the 26th of September. So it would be contiguous.
It's Tuesday.
What?
Tuesday. Are you
Don't
still
forget
on?
we switched it to Tuesday.
No, we went to Wednesday.
There was this confusion last time. We're supposed to stay the same as tonight.
But we had
So
accidentally
we
listed it
changed
as
all the
Wednesday.
dates so that the dates make sense. It's Tuesday, the same time, same station as same day of the week, same time as this class. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other housekeeping type questions? Okay, so one thing, this is the last class, so do do pose comments or questions if you have them. I'd rather have more of that and not get through some of the slides and things that I have. Otherwise, we'll get through a lot of slides and stuff. So let me, okay, let's get this out of the way. You guys see this too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a pain. All right. So I'm going to just review this stuff very quickly, but you know, this is this overarching view of things, and please, you know, question it or have any, you know, if it's not clear to you what's being said, please, you know, query me. But in general, I'm not going to repeat all the parts of it, but in general, I don't think we're going to heal the planet unless we work with families. Margie, when you first came into this class, I think you were saying, you know, that was missing in a lot of places, and it is missing in a lot of places. We're not going to go from healing individuals to healing the world, the planet. And in fact, we're not really going to heal individuals unless we heal families. This, just to remind you, nested means contained within and shaped by. Scales are different sizes in the nesting. Cascade means to repeat on different, you know, scales. All of this is fractal. Fractal means things are self-similar as you move up or down in the scales. They're not exactly the same, but the same patterns keep repeating, okay, with little variations in them. The big vision is we've got social intelligences. They are profoundly important. Trauma scales, it's doing the same thing in organizations, and it's doing the same thing on all these levels. I don't care whether you're talking about nations or ethnicities or religions, races, organizations. Anytime human beings get into groups, it's functioning. And we just absolutely do not give it enough credit. It does the same thing. It disconnects the subconscious social empathy, the group intelligence, the collective intelligence, which is busy working all the time, from our rational behavior. Trauma does that on all the scales. If it's not dealt with, personal trauma emerges typically later in individual lives, ancestral trauma in later generations, which means later in the life of that larger social organization that is, you know, continuous through time. Guys good with this? And it cascades. It just keeps propagating through these. Here's just a picture to remind you. You know, in the best case, the unconscious collective stuff and the conscious group stuff are in phase with one another, and there's good communication between them. All on the same levels, from the internal family, all the way up to corporate culture, mission statement, all the way up to, you know, the Jewish people and their, whatever you would call it, their rational ideas about what they're doing, and then their collective trauma, their collective. This, again, this is this measure of group intelligence. You can measure the cumulative, I don't mean numerically, but you can, you know, a given team or group behaves more or less with more or less intelligence depending on whether trauma is putting that big stop sign here or not. I mean, you see this throughout the world today. We have reverted to a kind of tribalism, right? Where people, you know, it's very hard for someone like me to talk to someone who's a huge Trump supporter. And a lot of, Brene Brown is got a whole book trying to advocate that we try to do this, that we need to do this. Is that a hand or? Margie, is that a hand? It's not a hand. It's just, you're just doing this. Okay. This is the book. I recommend it. It's really good. Again, all of this is because we think we're just rational beings. We've prized the rational beings. We've put women down because somehow they were more emotional and less rational. And rationality is not king at all. Rationality is in some sense supposed to be a kind of troubleshooter where we shine a spotlight on and think very consciously, dissect, look at very consciously. But most of the work of being a human being is done on this level here, which is what we're calling the right brain. Oops. Why are you not moving? All right, so let's do this. Okay, so now we're going to, where we're going tonight is the method. That was just a kind of a quick review. Are you good with that? You got it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with me that this sounds important?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's very, very important. We can't pretend. We cannot succeed pretending that we are rational. Like economics. This idea that we're rational actors, right? Most of economics is based on this idea that we make rational choices. Now there's something called behavioral economics, which assumes that we're not always behaving that way. So the method basically is, I don't care what level you're on, you've got a tangle of confused competing parts that are somehow a whole, bound together by some important shared purpose, survival or success of some sort. And this is global. I don't care what level you're on. You need different kinds of skills to work on different levels. Somebody doing what Margie's doing is like, it's not what I'm doing. I'm starting basically with the inner family and, bouncing back and forth between the inner family and the ancestral family. She's starting on the organizational level and needs a bunch of skills for like how organizations typically behave. If you can, as far as, energetics, as far as using EMDR, EFT, PAT, any of these, really, I think any of the trauma release methods, if they work applied to the whole, fine, but if they don't, or they're slow, or changes don't last, then look for some way to break out the key parts that capture the tensions. Okay, so that we get the players, and then use space, arrange them in space, make use of space, whether it's a mental imagery. NLP is full of using space in your head, right? It's an imaginary space. And what you'll find as you do that is that different parts need work on different things. The outer parts, the leader parts, the more grounded in present tense parts often need to tap on tolerance for the parts that are dragging them down, the parts that aren't in sync with the present. You follow that, right? That makes sense? Mm-hmm. And the inner parts, what's happened to the inner parts is they got damaged and hurt somewhere by some kind of acts of perpetration. And the outer part of the personality or group has now become the perpetrator by repressing them. You understand me? So we've got the same perpetrator-victim dynamic going on, only now it's like inside the person. So the outer parts are tapping on tolerance and willingness to deal with these parts that are getting in the way, that are freaking out at bad times, that are refusing to function in what we would call rational ways. They need they need to do different work. And then again, the way I do it, I am really trying to build relationships between these parts. I want people to be able to come out of therapy sessions and to be aware that, oh, that's so-and-so. I just got triggered by something. And, oh, I know who that is. You understand me? And if not immediately in the moment, at least after the fact, later on, I can communicate with that part of me about that triggering and somehow be helpful. Okay? All right. So as we come to the end of this, I really, I am deeply in favor of solution-focused work. I think this is a very nice little cartoon. Get some brush strokes in some kind of hypothetical or fantasized solution space as early as you can, because they'll draw people forward.
So are you saying focus on the DPC?
Yes. Yeah, build one. That's what I mean by the solution, yeah. Okay, so one thing that you guys are now definitely in a position to do is to be more aware of and or look for inherited trauma in addition to personal developmental, trauma. Even if you're not willing to do a constellation, you can cooperate with somebody like me. I mean, I can do an intake on somebody in an hour, and in most cases get a very good idea of where likely inherited traumas lie, what sort of direction. Some of you can start working with these. If you take the home altar course, you can definitely move more in that direction. Typically, analogous patterns are repeating across several generations. They're echoes. So the concussion is not, it's not that, Don was his name? I forget the client's name was, whatever. Yeah, the client's name I think was Don.
Migraine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't fall down and die, but he gets migraines, which is your tip-off. Do you understand me? It's an analogous echo. Something going on with the head. Or you can also, you'll again get more of this in the home altar course, or you can start screening for this. You got a list of questions from Mark Willin's questions. Who suffered this, who went to jail, who got sick, who died, that one. And then you've got my eight origins. You've got the wherewithal to start screening for this, to start looking for this. Now, I'm going to show you this. Maybe at the end, if we have time, I'll come back to these in more detail, and we talk about these more in home altar. This is just a matter of, this is an early drawing that I made when I was first getting trained. And all I want you to see here is that you look for the same stuff. You ask the same questions, you look for the same stuff. So the same things that you would ask here: previous relationships, deep loves, mates, children, lost children, abortions, stillbirths, miscarriages, early childhood deaths, adopted children, siblings, serious injustice. I mean, I just was trying to sort of get a list of these things. And then I wanted to draw something, because all I did to draw this was shrink shrink this and put it up here at the grandparents, and then shrink it again and put it up at the great-grandparents, and shrink it again and put it up at the great-great-grandparents. So it's not, it's in that sense, I mean, it takes skill, right? But it's not rocket science in the sense that you're looking for totally different things. If you know what's going on here, then you can make pretty good guesses about what went on here. You may not be able to guess the details, but you'll be able to guess the general outlines. And sometimes that's all you need. You don't need to know exactly, but you know that mom somehow really got traumatized, and it had something to do with her sexuality or her profession or whatever, right? This is the way I do genograms. I experimented with ancestors.com, which allows you to build these online genograms and everything. And that was just totally unwieldy because it didn't show the things that I wanted to show. I didn't want to see. I don't know if I can't zoom in on this, I don't think. Does that? Yeah, wait a minute. It lets me do that. So we want to go back one and zoom in. So you see that better. So up here, typically I'll write the desired positive change. An X means a death of some kind, an untimely death, like or any death. If I'm trying to abbreviate like Steve, and I need to put Steve someplace else, and there's no other S, I'll just draw a circle around S, and an initial, uppercase initial circle stands for some person, as long as it's not ambiguous. There's not two M's or something like that. This kind of a line means some sort of bad relationship, some sort of difficulty, abuse, hostility. I'll stick arrows at different ends of it. So this means, what's his name? Dan's father was, hostile to him or abusive to him in some manner. And I might write a little comment here about what maybe, if it was sexual abuse or physical abuse, I'll write sexual or physical. This is telling me the order of the relationships. So there was an affair that was somehow mattered. The dotted line means affair. This means marriage. Either one of them can generate kids. And so this says this is Dan's first marriage and this is his second marriage. Mary's first marriage is Dan. Her second is to someone named Chuck, and that happens to be Chuck's third marriage. I'm not tracking, Chuck's earlier marriages. There's abuse, emotional, from Chuck to Steve here. Squares mean obviously guys, circles mean girls. I always leave the ends of them open because the names are too long to write very often. So I leave the right side open so I can fit the name in. There is this sheet of paper has in very light print in halftone, the general structure for the grandparents and the great-grandparents. I don't know if you could see that. And I start drawing them in as we move up. And I ask my questions basically starting with the siblings and then to the parenting. And then as we get that filled in, we start to find out about what's going on in the different lines. Questions? Everybody okay? You can ask questions. I don't know why this is behaving differently. Okay, so this is an actual one. I won't spend any time on it right now. Maybe at the end we'll come back and look at it more carefully. If the thing that's interesting about this one I have here in highlighted a little bit, because this is a case where I have to draw the fact that this is an adopted child. So this line goes up here. There's these little humps that skip this, and now we have birth parents here, small. You follow? So this turns out to be, this really, I mean, sometimes it's just covered with can get very crowded sometimes, but it works. Here's my desired positive change up here. Important information, you know, and then this person has had a bunch of constellations. So here I'm just kind of noting what's happened in the constellations, that what's already been worked on. Okay. All right. So guidelines for setting up. Whoa. Wait a minute. Hold on. This slide seems out of order. Give me just a second here. Yeah, okay. No, that's all right. Okay. So first I think I may have mentioned this last time, but let's look at this. I invented these terms slim and bulky to describe different kinds of energy psychology and different kinds of constellations. So the slimmest constellation is something like a Gestalt 2 chair or an NLP thing where you've got, you know, the person imagine in a mental space, you know, like there's just one ancestor, one dad, one something. Two parts in conflict. I like to do things in physical space. I just like it myself. I'm not that great at holding. I have to be in a pretty deep trance to hold mental imagery solidly. And I don't always know what, you know, my clients are capable of, so I tend to stick with this. But there could be three. I'm working with a client right now who, you know, we got 4 chairs. We're not using them all every time, but we got 4 different parts, an outer part and three inner parts. So that's getting bulkier. Do you understand me? We have more going on. If we get into workshops, now you know, as long as we're working one-on-one and the constellation is a person moving from chair to chair, we're staying on the slim side because it's possible. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I won't get ahead of myself. As we get here, you know, when we get like larger workshops, we got more to deal with. We got more people's attention to deal with. We got more players, okay? And we have to take into account that all of those people's attention, intention, and emotional connection to what's going on are important. So we have to, what it comes down to is we can't be doing long interactions with one player, with one element in a constellation, because we start to lose all the other people. So that gets to the rule. As far as energy psychology, it's something very similar. The original, you probably, I don't know if I said this last time, but the original, you know, Callahan, Goodhart, and Diamond are the sort of 3 guys who did the original work, which includes, you know, the muscle testing, the tapping with affirmations, you know, using verbal affirmations and or reminders to hold a certain emotional state in the mind while we are tapping on the meridians in order to basically keep the nervous system calm and let the hippocampus and the thalamus and the amygdala keep the left brain online. Now that should make sense to you too now with the 2 classes ago. So this was, you know, this stuff was very complicated. There might be 15 points and you tap, you know, for this kind of trauma, you tap on this point 5 times, and then you go to this one and you tap 3 times, and then you go to this one and tap 15 times, and you do it in strict order. Gary Craig came along and, you know, said, he's sort of the original and the largest one who came along and said, well, we can make this simpler, right? So he invented EFT or evolved EFT, which is less bulky than this, right? It's not as hard to learn. You can show it to people quicker. You can have somebody read a little manual or something, or demonstrate it for somebody, and in the space of half an hour or something, you can get them going on it. There may be a lot more to learn, but you can get them going on it. So that's not as bulky as this. Which is Dan Benor's, I don't remember what this one is transformational holistic repatterning. TAT is that Tapas acupuncture? That's Tapas with just this. All of Donna Eden's, a lot of Donna Eden's stuff, cross crawl and the Wayne Cook posture and the 3 thumbs, which she's now changed to 4 thumbs. All of these are quick. They don't need teaching. They can have an impact without taking a long time to explain them or get someone to do them, okay? And then it goes all the way down to, tapping, just tapping. You've got a client or a representative who's, dealing with a bunch of anger. Well, this is the point for anger. So you can just say, well, how about you give a nudge? How about, would you just tap on this point a little bit for a while? And then you go off and do something else, do the butterfly thing. This is the triple warmer, which is the fight or flight governing meridian. And it's always good it's between probably a lot of you know this, it's between these 2 bones on the back of the hand here. So here we have this range of, oh, I see what's happening. I know what's happening. I'm not in the, never mind. We have this range of breaking, of constellations, we'll call them, a range of different kinds of setups. Okay, private sessions, more than 1 people, workshops, and we have this range of energy psychology tools, and both of them go from more complex to less complex. And the very simple rule is bulky constellations like slim EP, and bulky EP like slim constellations. Because you can like I'll do a session and there might be 3 chairs, but there's only 1 person. So we might spend like literally half an hour tapping on this part's anxiety. I'm immediately then going to go back to the other parts and say, how was that for you watching that? What was that like? What was your experience like as you saw that part of yourself? Because what I'm trying to do is get them to care about one another, get them to, work out what they need to work out. Sometimes they need to fight. It's exactly like a family, right? Families that really function very well, it's not that they never get angry or have disagreements. It's that they process these things. But the thing is, I can do that. We could spend, almost a whole session, and I've actually got 3 of the parts in the session, and I'm moving people back and forth. But one of the parts is the focus, and so I can do a whole lot of EFT on that one. Does that make sense? If we go into the workshop situation, I got a group of people whose attention and intention and emotional involvement I need to pay attention to and keep activated, right? I've got people standing on the floor. So going around and now doing 20 minutes of EFT on one of the representatives or on the client sitting next to me, that's going to typically damage, the other people are getting bored or they're losing their, their energy. Do you understand me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's more like, okay, so we might ask someone to do this and say, repeat something or tap on this, some appropriate slim intervention can be like super helpful. And you get into what the energy psychology people talk about, and which is still a somewhat disputed subject, which is called surrogate tapping, which means you're tapping, the representative is tapping, but, so you're tapping on the representative's body, or the representative is tapping, but you're affecting the ancestor through that. As the representative, because they're in resonance. As long as we do all these things that I've talked to you about in terms of keeping it in resonance, being respectful, and all these, guidelines that I've tried to put out, then you can very often do some sort of slim energy psychology intervention in the middle of a workshop on a representative who's feeling, the anger, the shame, the whatever of some ancestor, and in affecting the body of the representative, you also affect the energy of the ancestor. Okay, so this is important. Let's just stop for a second. Comments, questions? This is like the basic rule. Everybody good, or what's happening? I need some kind of feedback here. I'm a feedback hungry guy. Linda, go ahead. And let me first I got to move this out of the way and then stop the share. Okay.
So in your example of how we set things up and how we proceed through it, one of the things that we're talking about is figuring out what it is we're working on, and then either it's going to be just one person and using the Gestalt method of kind of a role play kind of thing, or as it gets more complex, you're going to go into the family constellation work where you're involving more people and more reps, objects or people. So it doesn't have to be a constellation.
You said more objects, because again, as long as we're doing one-on-one work with somebody, you're not going to be in the workshop situation. Most of you are not going to do. I do hardly any workshops anymore. I would like to do them, but they're just too damned hard to organize where I live.
Okay.
It's not for this kind of stuff.
Okay, and I hear that. I mean, that's good to kind of note, because I think it's also way easier to work with just one person, with the client, than it is to work with in a family constellation where there's more representatives. So in that context, what you're also saying is, if it's a simple kind of an issue with less parts, then using energy psychology or more simple energy psychology, then you're going to use just tapping or something simple. As it gets more complex, you're going to use something more bulky, where you're going to go towards EFT or a particular algorithm using.
I think if I understand you correctly, which I may not, but it sounds to me like you're saying the opposite of what I'm trying to say.
No, I think, no, I'm talking about or at least what I'm hearing is, if you have slim, you're going from slim to bulky. So if I have an individual that I'm working with and we're just doing a 2-chair situation, depending on the.
Let me just stop you a second. In that situation, I can always use bulky energy psychology, because I don't have the extra baggage of other people and a workshop situation, group management, all that stuff.
Right.
So it doesn't so much have to do with the complexity of their issues.
Okay.
It has to do with the therapeutic situation.
Right. And yeah, that's a good point, because I understand that, but I wasn't saying that. So good.
Yeah.
That's helpful to think about how to use this and how to apply it in a situation with a client. So it isn't the complexity of the issue so much as it is the individuals involved in the issue that we're dealing with.
Yeah. A very simple way to reduce this is the more more physical bodies you've got involved at the same time, the more you have to use Slim AP.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I get that.
Now, thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay.
One thing I should mention too is that if you're going to do a Slim EP thing in a constellation circle, you can have the whole circle do it with the person.
Yeah.
All right. So if we're doing this and we're or we're tapping someplace and we're tapping on anger, well, not just the rep who's dealing with an ancestor who's angry. You can have everyone tapping with intention. This gets very strong. But the downside of this, though, like Andrea Bosbach, now Largent, who was my first trainer, she had a 3-year training, and I didn't go through it all with her, but she spent a whole year just on group management, a whole year. And I had done 20 years of Native American healing circles and sweat lodges and stuff like that. So I know group management, but that's another whole skill, right? And most of you, I think, are doing, most of you are starting with the one-on-one work. So again, the number of representatives, since the representatives can be object people, the number of representatives isn't the same thing as the number of physical bodies involved, right? People.
So something just occurred to me, Michael, as we're talking about this. So you might be working with one client, but you also might be working with a couple.
Yes.
And in that context, that might be really interesting to have those two people, and you could make it with more objects or not, depending on what the situation is. But I think that would also increase the empathetic connection between those two people, depending on what the issue is.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
if the issues are issues between them, that's one kind of a situation. If the issues are the issues where they share the same perspective, that's another situation. But
yeah, go ahead.
Again, I would be carefully watching. If I was going to do a longer energy psychology intervention with one of them, I'd be watching the one who was not doing it pretty carefully to see what was happening to his or her attention, intention, and emotional involvement.
Well, I think what you said about having them both do it.
Well, if they're willing, if we're doing couples counseling with two people that are at each other's throats, they might not be willing. That's all I'm saying. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think in the context of, if you're at the point in the couples therapy where they're working together and trying to understand each other, and they're working together to help each other recognize the triggers and whatever's going on.
Yep.
That seems like that would be a really helpful technique.
I agree totally.
Okay, cool.
That's a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody else? Okay, so back to screen share. Let's get this out of the way. Oh, wait a minute. I having trouble changing slides here because I'm not in this. Well, maybe I don't need to. Maybe I can go into the slideshow mode here, in which case that should be. Now I should be able to change the slides easier, I think.
At the bottom.
You want this down at the bottom?
No, you have arrows at the bottom. It seems like that would go either forward or backwards.
Yeah, but also my mouse takes me forward or backward too. So we're gonna miss the header here, it looks like. This is general guidelines for setting up. Now there's a lot in, well, oh, I can get this almost totally out of the way. No, I can't get it. It won't stay there. All right. This is 8 things. We'll dig into several of them. But these are my ground rules for working this way. I employ space. You know, we did that work around social geometry. The spaces around the body are full of meanings. It's and those meanings are unconscious. So, you know, stuff that's social, stuff that's unconscious therapy can speak through those positions, through those postures, through that stuff. So, you know, I'm going to break out I'm going to take a guess at what I think are some parts to start with, right? And get them arranged in space. And in most cases, I'm going to ask the client to arrange them intuitively in some space, some arrangement. And I say the same thing, you know, don't be thinking about that arrangement. If you're drawn to some spot for this, good. But don't make a pattern with your mind. If our minds knew the answer, we wouldn't be doing this. If you were going to do a tarot reading, you couldn't pick the cards. Hello. You know, if you're going to read the tea leaves, you can't like first arrange the tea leaves and then get a meaning out of them. It's cheating. And the truth is that the spirit or the underlying whatever it is, this deeper reality speaks to us. If you're tuned in and respectful, it speaks through the random arrangements. Because the random arrangements get past our mental stuff. If I'm going to arrange these parts, I'm going to jump to this one. Don't subdivide it any more than you really need to. I really try to stay away from great big constellations. There's too many relationships to deal with. So that means you can group. You can just say, okay, we have a client and the client is the oldest and the client has 4 younger siblings. So maybe we'll just put out one, maybe for our purposes here, one representative for all those 4 siblings will do to start. Do you see what I mean? Because typically oldest do have relationships to the younger ones. But don't subdivide more than you need to. You need to try to capture the tension. In the home altar class, a lot of the stuff that's happened in the past is people will set up these constellations and there's no tension in them. There's no conflict. They'll put out the client and mom and dad and an uncle. So you know who's in conflict here, and you're using your intake interviews and your sense of what's going on here, your sense of the internal personality parts in many cases, or in another case, your sense of the parts of a business that are conflicting. I'll have to come to you in 1 second. You know, you're guessing, and again, you're guessing. You know that, right? This is just a hypothesis. It's the job of the constellation to tell you whether your guesses are right or not. As you process this, Margie, go ahead.
All right, first, you might pick up a little beep in the background. Sorry, can't do anything about it. It's the fire alarm happening. In terms of capturing the tension, Something just tweaked with me. It was a group I worked with actually over about an 18-month period, and I felt like we always missed the tension. So what happens, like I felt like there was just a tension underneath the surface and I couldn't quite get to it. I couldn't quite get, I guess they weren't willing to go there. But I couldn't take them there either. With the home altars, when they're set up and you feel that they don't capture the tension, what happens with those? Do they go anywhere?
Well, sometimes the tension is really hidden, right? Sometimes it's very covert because it's painful for that stuff to come out, right? It's the subject of all sorts of triggers, and it's caused a lot of, it arises from a lot of pain and overwhelm somewhere, right? What you can do, which is a very helpful technique, is to put out a wild card for the missing tension. You don't know what it is, but you can symbolize it and watch where it goes. Look at, what, if it's an object person, what kind of object person is it? Information will start to flow, and in the behavior of the rest of the players and that thing, oftentimes I might say, okay, well, let's put out a wild card. There's something we're missing here that seems to be a crucial conflict, and we don't know what it is. So pick something for that. And if it was a group, I'd pick a person, and I would say, find your own place. Go where you feel where you feel comfortable, where you feel it's right. And often that can be very helpful, because that physical person will run over and stand next to somebody, and that will immediately start to mean something. If you're using objects, then there's going to be an object someplace. And as you work with the home altar, or you work with your client over several sessions, what arises when you feel into being that? At least you've got something out there that starts to externalize this, right? You don't know exactly what it is yet, but you've taken a step. It's in the picture. Do you want to say more before I go to Linda? Okay, Linda.
So my question is, can you give us an example from one of the situations you shared with us where that showed up and how you worked with it?
I probably can't right now.
Okay.
It would take me too long to figure one out and too long to describe it.
Okay, that's fine. I was just thinking if you could, it would be helpful.
Well, that's perfect. That's a perfect thing for the home altar class, frankly. I mean, that's on the level of detail that we're working there. Stay small, capture tension, use ritual. This is a game. I tell people, if I'm doing chair work, I gently and firmly demand that people use first person. Don't sit in the chair of some inner part and talk about it. Don't say it feels, right? Don't use bureaucratic language. Don't just use simple Anglo-Saxon I, you sort of language, right? Talk to each other, talk to me as a facilitator, talk to another part of yourself. Say, I feel X when this happens, or something like that. And sometimes people get into this very quickly. Other times it'll take me 2 or 3 sessions to get to the point where I've got somebody like into the game. And I just tell them it's a game. It's just a game. Just pretend to be this part of you and speak in the first person. And in most cases, a few reminders will do it. But that's a ritual, right? Use ritual in other ways, but that's the basic one for the moment. Parts are people. I don't care what it is. Treat them as a person. Personify them. I'll say more about that later. The job of everybody in the game is to respect feelings. It's not to judge them, right? So if two parts are gonna fight with one another, then I'm gonna gently try to midwife that conflict, right? We want to respect this. The whole point of this is to respect these hidden and covert and lost and often painful and confusing feelings. As you move into this, as you get further into it, the biggest, most valuable thing is just to start speaking as the dynamic becomes clear. And I hope that word dynamic is clear to you now after the earlier classes. It means what's going on that's preventing, what the client wants to move towards, whether it's ancestral or personal. But there's a stage where either it's not going to resolve that quickly or whatever, but the intermediate stage is always, we'll just get the system to speak aloud the covert stuff. If it can just say, we're fighting because, they don't have to resolve it yet. Do you understand me? You just say, you want me to work hard on these things, and that's never been useful for me. That's always been I never got what I needed. Just to say that. Do you follow me? And when you're stumped and you don't know what to do, and you can see various tensions, see various covert conflicts, just speak them. Just say them out loud. It's a huge step just to say them out loud. And it's, in many cases, it's the first step to resolving them. It's like, okay, at least it's out in the open. We don't know what the hell we're going to do about it, but at least we know where the pressures are. And then just always remember that you're midwifing resolutions. You're really a kind of mediator. You may try to nudge things along. You've got this whole book full of techniques and things to use. Let's see what comes. Now, why does this? Okay, one way, we'll come back to some of these guys. I don't understand what's going on. There it is. Okay. This is kind of a global, useful wild card setup. You get a goal, you set up the goal, a representative for whoever it is desires that goal, and then you set up 4 wild cards. What opposes it, what supports it, who has secondary gains if it is achieved, who has secondary losses if it's who is going to lose if it's achieved. Does that make sense? That's one way to start with almost anybody about almost anything, because these 4 wild cards here will often very quickly turn into an ancestor or a previous trauma or a personality part or something. They'll start emerging as who and what they are. But the advantage of this is you definitely are looking for the tension. You're looking for the conflict. You have explicitly represented 2 kinds of conflict: the immediate opposition and the immediate support, and then the secondary gains and losses. And you all know what secondary gains and losses are, right? A lot of ancestral loyalties are secondary losses. I can't allow this to happen because I want to be loyal to my mother. I want to, you know what I mean? I'm holding her pain. If I don't feel it for her, then she'll feel more of it. That's a secondary loss. Make sense? Okay. You're going to meet, I think, you're going to meet sort of 3 kinds of situations. This may be a little oversimplified, but there's people that just have sort of purely personal, not necessarily very intense or layered trauma. Sometimes these are event-based, right? Somebody just had a traffic accident or something, okay? Or somebody's got PTSD about something that went on while they were growing up, but it's not anything that, it's not complicated by anything that was ancestral. Then I've seen people who've just kind of got purely ancestral trauma, like the example of the terrible migraines fade. So this was a young kid, 19, 20. If he had gone on without help and the migraines caused him to lose his job or become non-functional in some way, now we're going to start piling we're going to have personal developmental traumas start to affect him. You see what I mean? So if we didn't get to him till he was 35, all sorts of more bad stuff might have happened to him. But if we could so this is one argument for getting to people early. 20s and 30s, I would think, would be optimal. You're not going to, well, whatever, I don't want, that's too complicated, but sometimes you can kind of get situations where it's mostly purely, it's personal trauma, it's developmental or in some form, and you've got inner family work and you've got energy psychology, and there may be constellations of the inner family, but we don't have to bring a lot of ancestors into it. Again, going back to the terrible migraines fade, Don's childhood, basically, it was a pretty loving family. Nothing really that bad happened there. It happened before. Then you've got people like me and people like some other people I know and have worked with. And the kind of people I typically am best with and get mostly, you got mixed layers of ancestral and personal trauma. The ancestral trauma has caused personal trauma. The fact that the parents and grandparents are messed up has caused developmental trauma. It's a more complicated dance. The way I work with that stuff is to move back and forth between, first of all, I try to start moving the client towards something that's in a solution space, because that's what drives it. Either we get progress, or the fact that the progress, we start to see what's blocking the progress. It's a win-win situation. In therapeutic terms, it is. Because if we don't win by getting the progress, we win by we shine more explicit light on what's in the way here. Does that make sense? But these are kind of, I've seen, like there was one guy that, he was a dean at a college in New York City, who was always getting terribly hassled. He didn't have, he was attracting abusive supervisors. He was having a lot of trouble. And I did some intake work on him, and then we did a constellation. And the main thing that the constellation showed was that he had an older brother who had an abortion, who didn't survive. And for him, this realization that and some interactions in a constellation space with this older brother in spirit changed his whole attitude about himself. Because he'd never felt right in the position of the oldest child. He'd never felt like he was able to do it or be it. And when it was clear that he wasn't that, he started living his own life in a very different way. And I think pretty much that was just a pure ancestral trauma. That's the best example I have of that. My computer is messing up. So I'm pressing a button. Okay, so now let's look at some, let's take this diagram and move it through some stages. So if just in terms of, you know, Fluffy and Bowser and Dad, you know, what are we going to set up here? Well, just looking at this, I would tend to set up 3 parts here, because it's not like the dogs are pulling in the same direction or tending to behave in the same way. This one seems angry and aggressive. This one, if we interpret the picture a little bit liberally, is hiding and or maybe it's wagging its tail. I don't know, but it's, you know, this one is darker, this one is light. Do you understand me? So I would tend to set up 3 here because the pets aren't working in unison. See what I mean? We've got an outer, and we've got 3 parts here. What else? Well, probably, you know, I'm not going to set up the terrain. Bystanders might not be, but bystanders might somehow be part of the system, right? There might be somebody. In that case, we'd scale up to some kind of a larger system. Or another thing that, you know, we might set this up and find out that it doesn't get us what we need. So maybe mom forced dad to walk the dogs, whose upset spread to the dogs. So maybe mom's in this. Do you see what I mean? Maybe if we put in a representative for mom, everything will start to feel different. And you know, some of you have more experience than others with this, but the energy starts to feel different. It comes alive when you do the right things. It gets peaceful and serene. You start to resolve those right things. So maybe she's, you know, so maybe we scale up to a larger system, but we might only find that out by setting up this threesome first. Right? That's our parsimony rule. Like, don't set up more than you need to. Here's a more realistic. You know, we've got three parts here. You know, 54-year-old client, sexually abused at 6, enraged at 13. So this is kind of like the 6-year-old. This is kind of like the 13-year-old. This is the outer person trying to live his or her life, right? And it's a big tangle because these 2 are emerging in different ways and in different directions. They're drawing different kinds of experiences, and the outer self is having a hard time managing life. And again, these parts need to tap on different things, right? The 6-year-old needs to tap on all the overwhelming feelings around abuse. The 13-year-old needs to tap on a kind of rage or anger that emerged at that phase. Okay? You might scale up further. So, what is this crazy thing that showed up here? Go away. So if we scale this up to a larger system that it's nested in, and we get now back to mom and dad, this part is related to rejecting dad's abuse, the anger. This part is related, and the reason that this one probably suffered the abuse is a loyalty to mom's suffering. So we might need to let go of this as we're trying to work on the developmental stuff that's happening. Am I making sense with this? Then it might go back to the grandparents. So so I call this scaling up, right? Because most of you are going to start typically with the individual client, right? Except for a couple of you are working with businesses, so you've got groups. But this is what it looks like. How are we doing? Comments, questions? I don't know how we're doing with time here. Sounds like we're good.
I have a question.
Please.
Do you have any advice for scaling up when working with companies? How would you, I mean, sometimes I just get a hit that this is, that it's family trauma that the person is bringing in.
I mean, I don't do that kind of work, but I was trained in it as part of my 350 hours of coaching, the school.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 10 years in a family business and,
Yep.
and a bunch of years building software systems for other businesses, mostly small family businesses. And my experience is it's most often the familial stuff of the key players, and the key players aren't necessarily the bosses. Sometimes they're the line workers, that are actually making things happen or doing things that the bosses don't even know about.
Right.
And how to do that, the first and I think hardest step, and when we were trained by the guy who was the organizational part of the teaching team, he said it could take him 6 to 9 months to get some executive to the point where the executive was willing to go to his personal issues that were affecting things, right? That in essence, he was reacting to the head of this department based on the fact that this reminded him of mom or something, and mom had affected him in some bad way. That in a corporate or business context, it can be pretty hard to get people to go there.
Yeah, and it takes it takes that long-term relationship to establish that kind of trust.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any magic, it's not my area. I did not want to I could have made a lot of money doing this because I had the business skills, but I did not want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I had walked out of 10 years of having a day job, building a company, but I'm sorry, I don't have any magic other than to say it's hard and it's really an issue of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
I think most of your energy should go towards creating trust with that person and making sure that that person is not going to get torpedoed by somebody else if they do go there, if they do acknowledge that.
Yeah.
To the extent that they shift their behavior or it becomes a little more public or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Best I can say. It's hard. On the other hand, you can make a lot of money and get a lot of work that way because it takes a while.
Right.
All right. So what I want to leave you with here is what I call four powerful contrarian principles. I call them contrarian because they cut against a lot of different things that I was trained over a whole long life. And they are, like, here, take this one. When we become adults, we're supposed to leave the things of a child behind us. That's the way our culture tends to work. That's a mistake. We're supposed to leave the foibles and traumas of a child behind us, but we're not supposed to leave childlike openness, the ability to play, the ability to experiment, right? Personify anything. That's anathema in the science world. That's called the pathetic fallacy. And pathetic means two things there. Pathetic means attributing human feelings to inanimate objects or to trees or to animals or whatever. And then there's this, derogatory sense of, oh, that's pathetic, right? That's a poor, stupid thing that only Aboriginal savages do. The Aboriginal savages, honestly, we are finding out, we're resisting it like mad, but quantum physics and all sorts of things are pointing us to the fact that, I mean, the trees have a social life, for God's sake. They're talking to one another through the roots. They got fungi acting like neurons. We're not, it's not some, anyway. So these things are, so these are the two probably, let me point with this in a minute. This and this are probably the two most contrarian. But personify anything. I don't care what it is. If it's love, if it's death. I've had a number of constellations where I put death in. It can be very important in certain cases where someone's ill or there's issues around someone having died in some strange way. Put death in. Obviously, we're personifying the goal. I'm personifying the goal. The DPC, I'll ask somebody to go and feel into being the DPC. Go and try to be that goal. And as that goal, ask yourself, can I exist in this system? Do I feel welcome here? Do you see what I mean? Do I belong here? And in most cases, it starts out like, no, I don't belong here at all. There's no place for me in this. And that's the problem. Use space. Social meanings are primarily, they're coded in space. They're a big deal. And then there's this one, expect family in human groups. I think you'll find family type relationships in the internal family parts. You'll find them obviously in developmental and birth and ancestral families, but you'll find them it comes down to that in organizations too. So personify anything. One of the reasons I think that this is important and works, aside from the fact that there's a fundamental truth in it, that we live in a world that's alive and conscious, and we have a certain kind of consciousness, but the tables and the chairs and the rocks and the trees they're all made of consciousness, different levels. But my feeling about a child being born, from what I've read in neurology and whatever I'm doing, I'm interpolating or extrapolating or something. But I think that what's happened, look, that kid starts out in the womb, and everything that's not that kid is a person. Everything that's not that kid is mom. So everything is personified. Then it comes out into the world, and I think, frankly, it's little, and the social empathy system is the thing that's working. The intellect is not working. The physical reactions, it can eat, it can digest, and it can, can recognize faces. But I think that what's going on is that the child can't figure out why everything is no longer mom. Everything outside was mom. Right? Now we come out and what's mom doing? Mom is a counter over there, and the counter doesn't, or the table or the chair, it doesn't respond when I'm crying. Right? Doesn't seem to have a face kind of thing that I recognize. I think they're just slowly figuring out that it's not all another person. Do you understand me? So breaking out objects, breaking out different family members, breaking out the fact that the room, the crib that they're in or whatever isn't going to behave like a person. I think that's slow. So when we personify things, first of all, I think we're tuned into the fact that the universe is conscious. This is my shamanism. But secondly, we're tending to move people back towards the state that they were in when a lot of these traumas happened. We're moving them back to a younger version of themselves with that game of personifying. Does that make sense? kids have trees as friends. The other thing too is I think, well, no, I won't go there. That's another. Kids aren't fully in this physical world either. Little ones. I think they're still spirits. Wendy Ann McCarty's book, Welcoming Consciousness, is a really good read. It's perinatal stuff, experiments, and she's convinced and makes a very good case that an awful lot of kids are psychically aware and cannot figure out why the people around them are not psychically aware of them. They can't figure it out. It's like, what's going on here? What these people are, I'm feeling, I'm empathically and psychically connected. I know what they're feeling. I know what's going on, and they don't seem to be on that channel at all. The other thing here is once we see things as the person in our constellation work, we endow it with the ability to feel and talk and interact. And that's really helpful. Once it's a person, once a personality part is a person, I'm literally instantiating that person. I'm taking a muddle of trauma and implicit memories that are somehow grouped together and hold a certain perspective, and I'm giving them the use of the voice. I'm giving them personhood. Do you understand me? I'm giving them respect. I'm giving them status, which means that now they get to express. Now they get to become, in a sense, co-equal with the outer person and start to work things out. Okay. Don't understand why. Maybe it's because I'm clicking on this. Just by the by, no, this one is, what's this one? This one is Anchor What's Personified in Space. I think we've covered that well enough. You know how memory palaces work. You know that these people who win these huge memory contests and memorize thousands of digits, or can, flip a deck of cards at high speed and memorize it. They're literally taking physical spaces and putting the digits, this one goes on the mantle, this one goes next to it over here, this one goes over here, this one goes over here. They do this very quickly, but they literally will then just walk through, in their minds, walk through that space. So our memories are somehow related to space. Lucas Dirks has this whole form of therapy called social panoramas, which is very much like NLP, but he thinks that, he does all his therapy in terms of internal space. I'm clicking on I'll try this one down here like Linda told me to. Do what Linda says, damn it.
Just a suggestion.
No, you were right. I mean, I don't know why, but I should be able to hit the down arrow and it should change. And now it worked, but sometimes it doesn't. But the arrows always work. So Linda was right. But I put this slide up again just to remind you of the fact that space is, space is just very, very, very rich in conceptual metaphors. And those are not conscious metaphors, so they're very useful in dealing with unconscious trauma. Go back and click again. And this one is, I can put it down here now. This is just huge. Cultivate childlike openness. It's just a game. Once I can get somebody to relax, pretend, whatever they want to call it, you know what I mean? Once I can really get the pressure off and get them to just play. Just play. We're just play with this. Once they start playing with it, that which needs to emerge emerges so much more easily. Okay. And now I see I can't hit that button down there, the arrow, if I move this down there. I think we're coming towards the end here. Define family everywhere. Whatever it is, inner and outer human systems model on families. Clubs, businesses, nations, religions all take on a family-like structure. This is a quote from Freud. Parental figures emerge, sibling rivalries come out, and people find niches that often match those they had in their own family. Bad boy, cute child, nurturer, instigator. Business departments become sibling rivals. I ran the systems department for 5 years in this company. It was balkanized. Every department was out for itself because upper management was confused and kind of a mess. So we had some sibling rivalries among the departments. It was very clear. I think that's the end of the slides. Now, we're probably just about at the end of the class. Here we are. So, any final words or comments? I mean, we're at the end of this class. You guys have been a great group. It's been small, but you're very intelligent and accomplished people by and large. So it's been fun. I do hope to see some of you in the home altar thing, because then this will really get down to the nitty-gritty of doing it yourself and getting a lot of feedback on it. I hope you find this useful. If you are not, we're trying to fix our mailing list. We're trying to purge it. If you're not on the mailing list, please go to my website and opt in. I don't do that many newsletters, and they almost all of them have some useful stuff in them. Not necessarily. I'm not really good at advertising, for whatever that's the truth. But we're trying to, sort of get rid of the people that aren't looking at things, and it's going to take us a few months to reach everybody. But we're, so we have two lists right now: the people that have opted in again, plus the European privacy laws demand that we do this, and the Canadian privacy laws demand that we do this, and so on. Okay, anybody want to make any last remarks here?
Hi, Michael. I have a question.
Yes.
The webinar recordings, how long will they be available to us after the course finishes?
I mean, they sit there for a good year, right?
Oh, okay.
Sandy, I mean, we take them down when the next class comes around, typically.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will say this class is great, really great. I just feel like I don't have enough kind of experience in this particular field to fully digest everything in such a short time. But I've gained a lot, and I've kind of used things, even like, for example, my team recently has some kind of tension, like the work team, right? So I thought of one day maybe I could use the home altar idea to put certain things, represent the team members. Actually, it worked. Like it's pretty amazing. And I think the course really showed me like this family constellation is both an art, also science.
Yeah.
It's been really amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Also, I want to ask, like, the Facebook group will be on, like, also, right? Like, the Facebook will not be dissolved after the class finishes.
It goes away when the next class happens.
Okay.
Which is typically, it's going to be a year.
Okay. Yeah. I reached out to. Yeah.
The other thing too is, Anne, this is packed full of information. This is not a lightweight book or a lightweight course. I cover a lot of ground in every one of those chapters. So it's not surprising that it, I mean, like, I guess we've got, what, 2 people here for the second time? No, 3.
This might have even been my 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Izzy is back. I think, Gwen, you've been here before. Kat's been here before. This is a lifetime of work that's packed into this stuff and experience. So it's like martial arts, right? You keep learning the fundamentals again and again.
Yeah.
So listen, thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
No, I'm not saying goodbye. I have a question,
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
or actually a comment. So I just want to acknowledge that this has been really, really rich and really helpful on a lot of different levels, despite the fact that it's family constellations and the normal way of doing it is in a group with other people. I'm seeing a lot of different applications for it with individual clients. And that, yes, it's very, there's a lot there. And clearly I'm just being introduced to it. But yeah, it feels like it's very helpful, and it kind of brings together a lot of things. So I just want to acknowledge you for doing that. And thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
It's really helpful.
I appreciate being appreciated very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael, I have a
Okay.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
A quick question. You had mentioned a few classes back about that this was not from Bert Hellinger, as a lot of people say, strictly from Bert. Is there a specific place I can go and research, like the other areas that this came from?
I collected what I said in the, I mean, it was 5, whatever. I mean, the book was published in 2012. It was 2011 that I was doing all this research, and I collected Bert's history from a number of different websites. And, and the origins of family constellations came to me by studying Bert's history. Because he, first it was the Zulus and the Anglicans in Africa. Then he left the Catholic Church. He studied psychotherapy in Germany. Then he came to the United States for almost 20 years in Canada. And he worked with Jacob Moreno. He did psychodrama stuff. He did Eric Burns' transactional analysis, Borjo Ménage's hidden loyalties, Virginia Satir, whom many people say was already doing. She had something called family sculpture. So I don't remember, I collected that from various websites. I might take a look again, but if you, and I don't know what they've done. I mean, if you look up Hellinger's biography, there's no question about it. Nobody's hiding it. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
It's just that people have this, especially here in North America. Well, look, he married this Sophie lady. He rejected the psychotherapist that helped him get famous. And then this Sophie lady made him into an international guru. So, but if you read his, if you just learn about the facts of his life, you can see very easily where constellation work came from, because he was like me in the sense that I just run around and collect stuff and try to put it together. I don't care where I go, right? If it's relevant, I'll learn it or study it or whatever. And he did that. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah, that is very helpful.
Look for biographical stuff on him, and I think you'll find the same thing.
Thank you.
Michael, what was the work? Who's the work that that use the inner family and the dialogue, the inner dialogue.
Well, there's Richard Schwartz's internal family systems.
Uh-huh. But there was another one. There was a couple. who
There's
did
many.
one.
Who? So, somebody said something?
I did. I was just saying that there's quite a few with ego state work and with Gestalt work, all sort of in doing lots of different forms of parts work.
But there's one particular one that I'm thinking of. It was a couple who developed is it the inner dialogue or where you're talking to the different parts? Do you know what I'm referring to, Michael?
You
Or do
know,
you, Corey?
Izzy told me had a name for it that sounds like what you're talking about, and I can't remember what that is. But I don't know who that couple is, so.
I'll
don't-
look because I do, and I'm drawing a blank of what their names are. Do you remember any the names, Corey?
I don't remember the name of the couple that you're referring to
Okay.
as far as parts work goes.
Yeah,
No.
it's inner dialogue work. Something has really. I'll just Google it and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, you'll probably find them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it sounds like this is.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you again down the trail.
All right. Sounds
Bye,
good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Yeah,
Yeah, we
you.
can't hear you.
Thank
Bye.
Bye.